New videos every day.
Did you know that certain cells in our brain and our central nervous system actually have cannabinoid receptors? Cannabinoid, that sounds an awful lot like cannabis. Isn't that marijuana? So does that mean that we evolved to receive marijuana? And if our brains do have cannabinoid receptors, does that mean that we're hardwired to get high? In this video, I'm going to talk about what cannabinoid receptors are and answer these questions. First off, cannabis comes from the ancient Greek word for the common hemp plant. So we are talking about marijuana here. Marijuana actually contains more than 85 different cannabinoid chemicals. The most commonly known is the tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, the primary psychoactive substance in marijuana. Now, before the 1980s, scientists really didn't know how marijuana affected the brain or body, but they were very interested to find out. And in 1988, they discovered some different chemical receptors in the brain that responded to marijuana. And since those receptors were just being discovered while they were investigating the effects of marijuana, they decided to go ahead and call those receptors cannabinoid receptors. So since our brain does have these cannabinoid receptors, someone might get the idea that our brains are hardwired to receive marijuana. But that's really not the case. The fact is that there are many natural neurotransmitters that these receptors are meant to receive. It wasn't until 1988 that they discovered these first cannabinoid receptors, but it wasn't until 1992 that they discovered the actual natural neurotransmitters that those receptors are made to receive. The naturally occurring neurotransmitter that these receptor sites are built to receive are called endocannabinoids. And the marijuana chemical component found in the plant is called phytocannabinoids. So endocannabinoids are the naturally occurring hormone, and they don't cause you to get high the way phytocannabinoids do. So THC is a phytocannabinoid, which is chemically similar but not identical to the endocannabinoids that are naturally occurring. So because it's chemically similar enough, it will bond to those same receptor sites. But because it's not an identical chemical, it'll have a different effect than the natural effect of the endocannabinoids. Psychoactive drugs interact with the central nervous system in this way. Their chemical shape is similar enough that they can bind to those natural receptors, but because they are not the same chemical, they have a different effect. So LSD will bind to serotonin receptors, cocaine will bind to dopamine receptors, and amphetamines will bind to norepinephrine receptors. So the only difference here is that serotonin receptors and dopamine receptors were discovered before LSD and cocaine use were being examined. Cannabinoid receptors were discovered while they were researching marijuana, so they got that name. But you don't hear about LSD-anoid receptors or cocaine-anoid receptors because those receptors were discovered before LSD and cocaine were being studied. So you see how the term cannabinoid receptor is a little misleading. Really, these are endocannabinoid receptors that are receiving and being binded to by phytocannabinoids from the marijuana plant. So it's just like serotonin receptors, which naturally bind with serotonin, but which can also bind with the unnatural foreign substance of LSD. And just like Prozac can also bind with serotonin receptors, you don't hear them saying Prozacanoid receptors because that would be very misleading. So your brain did not evolve to get high. We are not hardwired to smoke marijuana. Another example is opioid receptors. Opioid receptors are named after the opioids like heroin that they also receive, but they are really meant to receive endorphins. So really these are endorphin receptors that also can receive opioids like heroin. Now there is one recreational drug that does occur naturally in the body, and that's DMT. But it naturally occurs in extremely small quantities. And when someone ingests a large amount of DMT, they trip. Coming up in a future video, we're going to talk more about pornography. Is porn healthy or is it hurtful? What's your personal experience with porn? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Be sure to leave a comment because we might even mention your comment in our upcoming video. And in another video, we're going to discuss behavioral psychology. Is man just a pleasure-seeking animal like a dog or a mouse? Or is there something more going on? Is our primary role in life just to avoid pain and seek pleasure? Or are there actually higher faculties? We'll discuss that in a future video. I hope that you'll go ahead and click the like button below to give me a thumbs up and share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it. If you'd like to learn more about how drugs affect the body, you can check out this video in the upper left-hand corner. And if you're interested to learn if overstimulation can make us miserable and if we could really please ourselves to death, you can check out my video in the top right. And what about depression? Is depression really caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain? You can check that video out in the bottom left corner. And if you're a pothead who found this video objectionable, I got one video for you, and it's in the bottom right.